Welcome to today's edition of the Rush 24/7 podcast.
I want to tell you how weak. I don't know whether it's going to be exploited. That's a whole other thing. But I'll tell you how weak the Democrat and Hillary position in this Benghazi hearing is. I just had some congressman from Washington State, a guy named Smith. The reason for Benghazi happened was budget cuts due to a Republican government shutdown. Greetings, my friends. Great to have you. Rush Limbaugh, and we are back at it, as promised yesterday. Here for yet another 3-hour excursion into broadcast excellence. The telephone number, if you want to be on the program, is 800-282-2882. And the email address, lrushbo@eibnet.com. So I've been trying to do a number of different things simultaneously here, assembling today's show prep data, and at the same time trying to focus and pay enough attention on the Hillary Clinton Benghazi hearings to at least be able to offer you some learned insight into this. And I want to go back and just remind you of a point that I made about all this on Monday, and that is that all of this has been a media hype for the express purpose of, when it's over, being able to claim that the Republicans did not land a glove on Mrs. Clinton, that she showed up and that she looked good and that she was composed and that she triumphed over this, and the Republicans weren't able to do a thing about it. That is the objective. That is what and by the way, that's the script. You know, everything in Washington is, to one extent or another, to one degree or another, scripted, and in some cases well in advance. So is this entire situation we think is unfolding spontaneously about the Paul Ryan and Speaker of the House story. I mean, I don't know anything specific. All I can offer you is my insight, my opinion, which is based on my intelligence guided by experience. But I don't think that much of what we see coming out of Washington, particularly as it is encapsulated in the daily media presentation called news, I don't think there's anything really spontaneous. I think it's all a script to one degree or another, and much goes on behind the scenes that we don't see and are not told about that is responsible for what we do see or read about or what have you. For example, and I'll get into it in more detail as the program unfolds, but the Paul Ryan for Speaker of the House, I think that's been a done deal for days. And maybe even weeks. I don't think we would have gotten to this point if Ryan had not already gotten some assurances from the Freedom Caucus, the conservative House members, he was going to get enough support from them to even take it this far. It's just not how professional and seasoned experts do it. It's no different than a president having a very important summit with a foreign leader. Let's say Reagan and Gorbachev. Everything that they were going to do was agreed to before they ever met. And if they couldn't agree to it, they wouldn't meet. So that when the actual summit or meeting takes place, it's made to look like it's all happening at that moment. But it really isn't. All of it's too important to leave it to chance for both sides. So you have all these meetings consisting of underlings and advisors, and you try to come to some kind of agreement before the actual confab or summit or meeting between the two principals. Well, you almost apply the same kind of thing here to the Hillary Clinton Benghazi hearings, although there's admittedly and understandably far more spontaneity here, because whatever questions or whatever line of attack the Republicans have, I don't think they've exposed it to Mrs. Clinton. In fact, I've detected something that I actually suggested earlier this year on these hearings. And I'll just briefly, before getting into that in detail, I suggested that in addition to, and maybe with even more emphasis than focusing on this email business, tie her to Libya. She clearly wants to be seen as the person who vanquished Gaddafi. Well, let her have it, because Libya is an absolute mess, just like the rest of the Middle East is. But if she wants to be tied to Libya, do it. And so far, there have been a couple Republicans who have done a really bang-up good job today of focusing her as the architect of what happened in Libya. Benghazi just a part of that. Taking out Gaddafi, who had become an ally of sorts, actually led to all kinds of messes being created, not just in Libya, but throughout the region. And I think that the overall objective here, if it's not too late, if they could just focus on her incompetence as Secretary of State with the emails in Benghazi folded in as part of it, could actually end up being somewhat of a surprise attack, and it would be effective. Now, the biggest lie that I have heard yet, and we have a long way to go, the biggest lie that so far has I guess, become the identity of these hearings is that Hillary's top concern in Benghazi was the safety of American personnel there. It really has been interesting to watch her contradict herself on this. On one hand, she wants to be seen as owning it all, in charge of and knowing everything. And then depending on the questions she gets, that was sort of, associates were dealing with that. I don't quite recall. I'm not really sure. So she wants it both ways. She wants to be able to say that she was in total command, fully aware, making all the decisions. But then on certain things, not so much. On certain things, it's impossible for one Secretary of State to know everything, Congressman. That's not what I mean. But I was aware of this. No, I'm not aware of what my two associates... No, that I didn't know it. I can't dispute it. But she wants it both ways here. She also has said, to me, this is a hanging curveball waiting, and I don't know if they're going to do anything with it, or maybe they already have. Questioning is ongoing here. She said there was no credible threat on the morning of 9/11/2012. Really? There was no credible threat? Why then did the State Department Cairo issue an apology on that very day? Well, we know why. They issued an apology on 9/12 for something that hadn't happened yet because they had already laid the groundwork for blaming a video, and they were apologizing in advance, as they said, hoping to prevent any rioting or unrest if they could just, as good liberals do, hey, we're sorry, we didn't really mean anything by it, you don't have to attack us. I thought that might work. There was a credible threat. There was a credible threat across Egypt, a credible threat in Libya. There were credible threats every day. To say that there wasn't a credible threat, which takes me back, the biggest lie of all is that Hillary's top concern was the safety of the American personnel there. That's not true. And you can go back and listen to the families of any of the four who died there. It was not her concern. She's even been tripped up on that a couple times today. In reality, Hillary Clinton's biggest concern was preserving the campaign lie that Obama had terrorism on the run. You remember the Democrat convention. GM is alive and Al-Qaeda is dead. Whatever the phrase was, we had saved General Motors and we had vanquished terrorism. We beat Al-Qaeda. We beat bin Laden. Bin Laden is dead. GM's alive, or whatever. Remember, they had established a theme for their convention and their campaign. And here comes Benghazi, and they cannot allow for what happened in Benghazi to deter their efforts here. So the concoction of that video as the reason for the unrest in Benghazi and over in Cairo throughout the region, that was a lie, and it was to preserve the campaign lie that Obama had terrorism on the run. Everyone and everything, including the truth, was sacrificed in order to preserve the lie that Obama had beat al-Qaeda by killing bin Laden and had saved the economy by reviving General Motors. That's why the lie on the video was concocted. It was about the election in 2012. The evidence of that was clear when we saw Candy Crowley in the debate prior to that election join sides with Obama when Mitt Romney was about to score some big points on this whole Benghazi thing. So there's much to uncover here. I just don't know whether it's going to be, and even if it is, I don't know how it's going to be reported. I mean, there's two ways of looking at this. If any of you have had it on TV, when you see the wide shot of Mrs. Clinton sitting at the witness table and then the long desk where sit our esteemed elected officials. And one view of that picture is, and then they get a close-up of Mrs. Clinton, of course. And you say to yourself, I can't believe this woman is on the cusp of becoming president of the United States. Are we really to believe this? The other view, the other way of seeing the optics today is the way the drive-bys will position it for the low-information voters. And it'll go something like this. A lonely, valiant, and brave Hillary Clinton sits alone under the glaring lights, being interrogated by a nearly all-white Republican committee on her role in American foreign policy in the Middle East. That's probably how this whole thing is going to be portrayed at places like Yahoo News and Vox Media, wherever the low-information crowd goes to get their news. So the objective here, as I say, when this is all over, is to praise Mrs. Clinton triumphing on her own and by herself, facing long odds. The Republicans didn't lay a hand on her, and now there's nothing stopping her quest for the White House. That's what they hope to be able to say, and they'll say it regardless what happens here, especially since Biden decided he's going to stay dressed, keep his clothes on, and not run. We'll take a break and be back after it. Views expressed by the host on this program have riveted the nation for 28 years and have served to blow up the once powerful and closely held monopoly of the drive-by media, which, of course, has made them angry and unstable and mean-spirited and extreme, and we are here up against it all. 800-282-2882 if you want to be in the program. I can't honestly tell you. Snerdley, have you been watching any of this? All right, now, you'd have to. Nobody's laid a hand on her here, right? There is anybody casually watching this is not even going to have seen anything to make them sit up and say, wait, what just happened, right? And I don't expect anything will like that happen. That is why I tried to set it up for you on Monday by telling you what this is all about. Now, I want to go back, grab Soundbites audio Soundbites 4 and 5. I may have missed some of this. Admittedly, I did. I haven't been able to watch it wall to wall. But I want to go back and play for you the montage we put together of Obama and other regime officials explaining what happened in Benghazi. And as to the best of my knowledge, this has not even been brought up yet in these hearings.
I don't care how offensive this video was, and it was terribly offensive, and we should shun it.
This video is disgusting and reprehensible. It appears to have a deeply cynical purpose to denigrate a great religion and to provoke rage.
Let's be clear. These protests were in reaction to a video that had spread to the region.
You had a video that was released by somebody who lives here, sort of a shadowy character, who is an extremely offensive video.
The unrest we've seen has been in reaction to a video.
There's a crude and disgusting video sparked outrage throughout the Muslim world.
It was a spontaneous, not a premeditated response, a direct result of a heinous and offensive video.
I know there are some who ask, why don't we just ban such a video? And the answer is enshrined in our laws. Our Constitution protects the right to practice free speech.
Yeah, that's Obama at the United Nations, anticipating questions from the tyrants and dictators that meet there. Well, hey, why not just kill this video guy if he's caused you this much trouble? And Obama says, remember now, America's not yet like your countries. I just can't shoot these people. But I can arrest them and put them in jail, which I have done. Mrs. Clinton, January 23rd, 2013, Senate Foreign Relations Committee hearing on Benghazi. She testified. Senator Ron Johnson, Republican Wisconsin, said we were misled, that there were supposedly protests, and an assault sprang out of that. And that was easily ascertained that was not the fact. The American people could have known that within days. He's saying, you people lied about this video for weeks, and we knew soon that it wasn't that, and yet you continued to ascertain or say things that weren't true. And you could have set the record straight much sooner than you did.
With all due respect, the fact is we had 4 dead Americans. Was it because of a protest, or was it because of guys out for a walk one night who decided they'd go kill some Americans? What difference at this point does it make?
What difference does it make? That is the seminal question. That is why these hearings are taking place. What difference does it make that 4 Americans are dead? What difference does it make? Why? What difference does it make? How? Isn't the point that they're dead? And this is how the Democrats and Mrs. Clinton have sought to deflect this from the get-go. But I'm not aware of any of this having been brought up yet. There is so far in these hearings, a focus on her emails, and there are plenty of contradictions in them. There's no question. But again, this email story's been out there for so long, and the drip, 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 drip. And many people, I think, are just, and I speak specifically of the low-information voter, tired of it. It hasn't led to anything. Every day there's news about the emails, and there's nothing comes of it. So what's the big deal? And they begin to be suspect or suspicious of those who keep promulgating the story, lose interest in it. Anyway, her opening statement, just a brief review. It was overacted. It was obviously scripted, which they all are. It was rehearsed. I'm sure that Elijah Cummings, the ranking Democrat on the committee, the chairman here is Trey Gowdy. Elijah Cummings from Baltimore is the ranking Democrat. And I'm sure the Clinton team wrote his remarks or worked with him on it. And there would not be anything wrong with that. I'm not saying anything wrong with that, but I'm just suggesting that it probably happened. But she was really overly dramatic. And I think that in itself is evidence of how bad this is. She basically, she's having to pretend that she cares about people she left unprotected and undefended. That's really what happened. She's having to act today like she really cares that she left Americans unprotected and undefended. And she's trying to balance, yeah, I was in total control. I'm running the show. I didn't know about that, though, and I wasn't aware of that. Can't know everything. Not humanly possible. Anyway, we'll keep monitoring. Anything happens, we'll be sure pass it on. By the way, there is one laugher that has occurred in the hearings. This is what you call chutzpah. Politico has the details. Hillary Clinton said in the hearings today that she didn't conduct most of her official business as Secretary of State via email. Yeah. She didn't even have a computer in her State Department office. She didn't do most of the business of Secretary of State by email. She said this during her testimony. She was being questioned by Indiana Republican Susan Brooks. By the way, Jim Jordan of Illinois just launched his questioning, and it looks promising. I hope we're rolling on that. At any rate, Susan Brooks, Indiana Republican, Clinton was asked to account for the lack of emails to and from State Department officials regarding the situation on the ground in Libya from 2011 to 2012. The situation was deteriorating. Remember, she thinks Libya is a great success story, vanquishing Gaddafi. And yet the email trail between State Department officials and the regime regarding what was going on the ground in Libya 2011, 2012, there isn't much of one. And Mrs. Clinton said, well, Congresswoman, I didn't really conduct most of the business I did on behalf of our country on email. And the room just, I don't know how it didn't erupt in laughter. And this is her attempt, obviously, to relegate the email story to way over there, out of the way. It's irrelevant. That's those emails. I didn't even do most of my business in email. I didn't even have a computer in my office at the State Department. She said, I conducted my business in meetings. I read massive amounts of memos. I read a great deal of classified information. I made a lot of secure phone calls, and I was in and out of the White House all the time. So she's saying just because it was not on her email doesn't mean she was not responding or reacting to any situation at hand. So she's trying to say that this email thing you guys are all following, there's nothing to see there anyway because I didn't do most of my business on email. No, there were only 60,000 emails in that private server, 30,000 of which she deleted before anybody saw them, claiming they were about yoga and her daughter's wedding and gift registrations for the reception and all of that. And the other 30,000 she deemed, oh, these are okay. I have no doubt there are all kinds of emails going back and forth to Mrs. Clinton and people in 2011, 2012 about Libya, but they're gone. And that's why she can say what she's saying here. But you have to hand it to her. While the entire political apparatus is trying to chase down Hillary Clinton's emails and to find some evidence of wrongdoing in there, here she comes today under oath. I didn't emails. I didn't do most of my business on email. I didn't even have a computer in my office. And everybody's supposed to go, oh, no, we've been snookered again. Oh, no, Mrs. Clinton's pulled the wool over our eyes again. She said, there were a lot of things that happened that I was aware of and that I was reacting to. If you were to be in my office in the State Department, I didn't have a computer. I didn't do the vast majority of my work on email. She said, I bet there's a lot of Sid Blumenthal's emails in there from 2011, too. Brooks said, well, we'll get to that later. And Hillary said, well, I don't want to give a mistaken impression about what I did and how I did it. Most of my work was not done on email. My closest aides, officials in the State Department, the rest of the government, as well as the White House and people around the world, I talked to them in person. I talked to them on the phone. I didn't do email. So, in short, she's trying to tell everybody, you're chasing the wrong tail here because there's nothing to see because I didn't do it. Hillary sent at least 60,000 emails. None of that while she was in her office? None of that was done from a computer? None of it was State Department business? Is that what we're being told now? She only did email at home? She didn't have a computer in the office? And the email she did at home had nothing to do with Libya, Benghazi, or any of that? Well, she can go up there. I know she's under oath. She can go up and say whatever she wants to say. It's going to be up to Hillary opponents, interviewers, interrogators to expose it and get to the bottom of it. And that's just going to depend on what kind of energy level people have that they want to really expend on this. Now, before we go to the phones, I want to take you back May 26th, right here on this program, the EIB network, right behind that. The golden EIB microphone. How to focus America on Hillary's Libya failure. And this is what I said back on May 26th. Let's go back to Hillary and Libya. Now, we all know Mrs. Clinton's email snafus, and we all know about her problems. We all know about Hillary's genuine general incompetence as Secretary of State, and the fact that she didn't achieve much, and the fact that all the relevant emails have supposedly been deleted and are gone, is evidence of her incompetence, we think. They've hidden it. They've gotten rid of it. They've basically deleted evidence. Okay, so how do we nevertheless tie Mrs. Clinton to the boondoggle that's Libya? Benghazi is in Libya, and it's a boondoggle. It was a disaster. 4 Americans dead. An attack, a terror attack that was known to be a terror attack in advance of its happening, which was lied about and blamed on a video, if you recall, okay? So how do we overcome the media? And how do we get the truth of Mrs. Clinton's operation and her incompetence to the people? I mean, this woman wants to be the next president. People deserve to know the truth about this and everything else regarding her tenure as Secretary of State. Not that she's some savior, not that she's some brilliant Secretary of State, smartest woman in the world. People need to know that she was a disaster. From Russia to the Middle East to Libya to wherever she went, she was a disaster as Secretary of State. And Benghazi happens to be the poster for it. The American media is not going to do that. The drive-by media is not going to expose Mrs. Clinton. As you well know, they're going to circle the wagons and protect her, and they're going to try to destroy those who criticize her. The American media is not even going to cover Libya as a post-Hillary disaster. If anything, they're going to follow Hillary's lead and claim that Hillary was a great architect of a wonderful foreign policy achievement in Libya. But just like Iraq is a post-Obama disaster, so is Libya. All of the Middle East is a post-Obama disaster, meaning after Obama gained control of the foreign policy of our country, began implementing his agenda, it has been a disaster. ISIS created, Al-Qaeda reconstituted and growing. There's no other word for it. It's an ongoing disaster that is the direct result of a bunch of arrogant, condescending, incompetent leftists running American foreign policy. The media not going to say any of that, obviously. Now, what you generally need in the media to persuade people or to call people's attention to something is pictures. Pictures are needed in order to attract and hold and focus people's attention. If the media flooded the zone with before and after pictures of Libya, with the idea that Hillary was the architect of what happened there, pictures of Libya before Hillary, pictures of Libya after Hillary, pictures of Libya during Gaddafi and post-Gaddafi, because she's proudest of getting rid of him, even though he had become an ally in his latter days. The pictures exist. It's just a question of getting them out there. We know the media isn't going to do it. If she were a Republican, then you would have seen pictures of Libya post-Hillary and pre-Hillary, and you would have concluded already she's incompetent. But she's not a Republican. She's a Democrat. So they circle the wagons. Now, if they show the emails, and a member of this committee did today, it was a great display, sat down, so I want to show you something, Mrs. Clinton, stacked a bunch of Hillary's emails on the desk. If they showed the emails, this is the key, and these emails exist. If they showed the emails from Hillary's team praising her for ownership of Libya, with then a picture of Benghazi, it would negate whatever these phony emails praising her are. Now, that's not going to happen in a drive-by. So my suggestion, this is back in May of this year, May 26th, my suggestion is The second best way to focus the people of the U.S. on Hillary's Libya disaster, and it's going to require the Republicans to play. I mean, we conservative media can't do this, so the Republicans are going to have to do this. They're going to, and this is the perfect occasion to do it here, these hearings. They should make no bones about it. They should note that Hillary's most significant accomplishment as Secretary of State is Libya. She wants that. Let her have it. The word Libya must be tied to Hillary Clinton. And I have to tell you, early on in these hearings, a couple of Republicans did just that. That's why I perked up and took notice. Because I think it does have at least some potential of exposing her incompetence. Anyway, brief time out. Your phone calls are coming up and more, so hang tough, folks. All right, the video excuse was just discussed under questioning by Congressman Jim Jordan. And he pointed out the contradictions. He read two quotes where she talks about the video was responsible for all that happened, and then he quoted her as saying, everybody knows the film had nothing to do with it. And then he said, Mrs. Clinton, why the disparity? Why not just tell the American people the truth? I did. You're confusing things. I was talking to some president of a foreign country at one point. You know how we have to deal with things like that? And the other, it was preposterous. She was nailed on the fact that they all knew this video was a trumped-up excuse. But she got off the ropes. There was no damage done. As far as I could tell. I mean, I got to be honest here, and I'm trying to squeeze watching this in just a few short minutes here. And it's still ongoing. Jordan's time expired, and I didn't get to see the bulk of his questioning of her, so I don't know what other facts that he had, and I'm sure he had a lot. I don't know the impact that he made on this. I'm just saying that when he hit her with the direct contradiction of how on the one hand she's telling people, yeah, we know the film had nothing to do with it, and the other hand, still to this day she was citing the video and still using it in these hearings. Still relying on it as the reason Benghazi happened. I think, it's easy to sit here miles away, not under the bright lights, not on television, but to me this seems like a slam dunk. But then I fall back on something I realize more and more and more about Washington is that what we see is about 10% of what's actually going on there. And I'll explain that in greater detail as the program unfolds. Let me grab a call, get one in here before the first hour expires. It'd be Rick in Melbourne, Florida. Thank you, sir, for the call, sir, and I'm glad you waited.
Thanks, Rush. Thanks for taking my call.
Yes, sir.
The question I'm just dying for one of the Republicans to ask Senator or Mrs. Clinton is, why did she not ask during that 2012 time period when she was getting all these briefings and having all these meetings, why did she not ask, what does Ambassador Stevens think the security ought to be? They sent him in there initially saying he's the guy, he's got all the experience. We're going to rely on him to tell us what the ground situation is, how long he should stay, what should we do.
My recollection is that he was telling them that there wasn't enough security, and he was asking for more, and it never came.
Yes, he was. But Secretary Clinton keeps saying as though she didn't realize that was the case, that she was letting lower-level people make the decisions.
See, that's what security. I mean. She says that after claiming she was Ms. Detail, in on everything, single-handedly running the show on top of everything. All the underlings were dealing with the security question. That really never reached.
And the ambassador was somebody she knew. She handpicked him. She trusted his judgment. But apparently she didn't think to ask. After the bombings, after they'd had some encounters with the folks there, she didn't think to ask, what does the ambassador think we ought to do security-wise? She just left it to
what is
else.
that? Okay, look, you obviously are a thoughtful person, studied this. What does that tell you? There's a reason. There has to be a reason for that. He's asking for more security. She's not paying any attention to it. What do you think?
I think she just wasn't paying any attention. I think the emails that when they were doing the comparison of the two sizes of emails from 2011 and 2012, and the staffers saying, I don't even think she realizes we have a presence there. I just don't think she was even paying attention.
Well,
I think she...
Because he was writing, the ambassador, Stevens, wrote constant memos begging for more security. He even threatened to leave his post if they didn't get more security. And you're saying, just make sure I understand, you don't think she ever even saw them?
Can't tell.
But if she did see them, she didn't care?
Yes, she either saw them and didn't care. There was some political fallout that was going to cost her to make the decision to send more security. Or she didn't care enough to pay attention.
Well, that's what you think. Didn't care enough to pay attention. That is something. No. There has to be something more than that. She was bragging today about how he got to Libya.
Yeah,
he had to sneak over there on a boat, and she's bragging about this.
Yeah, bragging about his experience, his judgment, and she even made a statement like, we were depending on Ambassador Stevens to make the calls.
Well, I think that's all BS. I don't think Stevens was there to be ambassador to Libya. That was the post, but I don't think he was there for that. And that's why his calls for security, they weren't related to what his real purpose was, which I think involved Syria. But anyway, I've got to take a break. No. If Hillary Clinton didn't have a computer in her office and didn't do most of her business on email, then why have an off-the-grid server at home in Chappaqua? What would be the reason for that? No, 99.8. I meant to short myself there. Almost always right, 99.8% of the time. Great to have you with us, my friends. 800-282-2882 if you want to be on the program. And the email address, lrushbaugh@eibnet.com. Trey Gowdy is the chairman of this select committee questioning Hillary Clinton today about Benghazi and her emails. What I just saw was dramatic. Were you paying attention to it? What I just saw was dramatic. Trey Gowdy, how best to describe this? Because I don't want to oversell it. What I have learned when I watch things like this, when I think people have hit a grand slam home run, most people think, that was barely a single. But to me, Trey Gowdy just embarrassed the hell out of her. Trey Gowdy just exposed her. Trey Gowdy just illustrated how the Obama White House refused her permission to hire Sidney Blumenthal because they didn't trust him. She went ahead and hired him anyway. He got her to admit. Well, what was he doing when you hired him when the White House rejected him? Well, I don't know. He was a consultant for many entities. Well, what? Do you happen to know any of the entities? No, I don't, Congressman. Could he have been working for your husband? Oh, he was, in fact, working for my husband, Congressman. So he was working for the Clinton Foundation. Yes, that's right, Mr. Chairman. He started reading emails from Sidney Blumenthal to Hillary. And one of the emails was Blumenthal asking Hillary to further events on the ground in Libya that would help him with a business deal that he had. And she responds that she will. And Gowdy's asking her about it, and she gets this look of utter anger on her face and frustration. And gone is the smile and the warmth and the caring and the compassion. And it's replaced with Nurse Ratchet at home in the cuckoo's nest. And one of the inmates has gotten loose, and that's Gowdy. She's got to somehow get him back in his cage. He continues to press, and every question he asks that she just, I don't know, Mr. Chairman. I don't know, Mr. Chairman. Is it true that Sid Blumenthal worked for your husband? Yes. Is it true that Sid Blumenthal worked at Media Matters? Silence. I don't know. I assume he did. Is it true that he worked for another left-wing group? I don't know, Mr. Chairman. I don't know. I can't know everything. Starts reading the emails. And when the break ended, he was reading to her a bunch of cables involving intelligence in various parts of the world. And he said, Mrs. Clinton, are you aware that Sid Blumenthal did not write any of those? He sent them to you. Well, I didn't know it at the time, but I was aware that maybe, but no. Congressman, well, do you know who did write them? Have you learned since who wrote them? The cables that he sent? Well, I don't know, Mr. Chair. I don't know. What difference does it make? She didn't say that, but that was the attitude. What difference does it make? And Gowdy's point was, your guy, the Obama administration refused to hire because they didn't trust him. You hire, and he's dealing with American intelligence agencies, and he's getting intel from them and passing it on to you, and you write him back saying, keep it coming, keep it coming. I guess, Mr. Chair, I don't know. I guess it happened that way. Now she's sitting there with her head in her hand, trying to look like this is irrelevant and boring. Now, I didn't hear any of the Jim Jordan other than the very beginning of it, but see, to me, this looks like huge points scored. This looks like a slam dunk that she has been exposed. And every time I think that happens in a situation like this, I later find out that nobody else thinks it was that good or bad, depending on your perspective. So I've always tried to exercise restraint in describing these things to you. I can't tell you how many times it's happened that I think during the Clarence Thomas, Anita Hill hearings or the John Roberts hearings, the Alito hearings, every time I thought that somebody scored a huge point exposing one of the Democrats on the committee or whatever, I later, in reading about it, find out that the professionals thought it was no big deal. So I thought, okay, well. So I've learned to try to temper my reaction, but this was I'll tell you how Gowdy started it. And this was really good too. One of the Democrats, I don't know who it was, accused Gowdy and the other Republicans of conducting a prosecution. That these hearings were prosecution. And Gowdy said, I want to respectfully disagree. This is not a prosecution. You and I both know what a prosecution is. A prosecution is you've already formed your opinion, and then you assemble the evidence and go out and prove it. We don't prosecute things that we don't know that happened yet. That's all this is an investigation, and we can't get witnesses up here. And when we get them up here, they lie, and they don't tell the truth. And if I'm a family member of one of the 4 people killed in Libya and I'm watching this go by, I'm embarrassed and I'm ashamed and I'm angry because the people will not talk. All we're trying to do is find out what really happened and we're being stonewalled. This is not a prosecution. So he, as far as I was concerned, blew that Democrat on the committee, whoever it happened to be, out of the water as well, with what the objective was. Now, back, one more thing on this act of chutzpah by Mrs. Clinton in Now Today saying at the hearing, I didn't do much email. Well, I really didn't. I didn't even have a computer in my State Department office. Most of the business that I did, Secretary of State, was not done on email. Of course, everybody's scratching their heads. What? Right, then, okay, if that's the case, why have an off-the-grid server at home, Mrs. Clinton? If email was so irrelevant, if you didn't even have a computer in your office, I think the fact that she admits that she didn't have a computer in her office, that tells us exactly the computer and the server were at home because she didn't want anybody knowing anything about what she was doing when it came to email and the use of her computer. And I'll guarantee you she's not happy these Sid Blumenthal emails are out there. They think they can overcome it and isn't any kind of big deal. But She was exposed for that brief moment for what she is, an extreme leftist radical. And that's what's never said about this woman. The Republicans never say it about her. Political opponents never describe Hillary Clinton as she really is, because everybody's still scared to death of her. Something I still don't understand. But they are. Now, the other political news, because there is other political news going on out there, and in the Republican presidential campaign, there are a wild bunch of stories from thehill.com. Donald Trump closing in on 100 days atop the Republican primary polls. The race has tightened somewhat. Ben Carson now leads Trump in Iowa. And the political establishment is shocked. Now, Ben Carson, they shouldn't be. Carson has been working Iowa like crazy. He spent a lot of time there. He's giving Iowa a lot of attention. The details are these. Ben Carson has surged past Donald Trump in Iowa. This is a Quinnipiac University poll, likely Republican caucus participants. That's just out today. Carson leads the Republican field with 28%. Trump has fallen to 20%. Carson's lead is beyond the margin of error. A September survey by Quinnipiac of the same sample of caucus attenders, Republican caucus goers, had Trump at 27% and Carson at 21%. Also scoring a boost was Marco Rubio. Marco Rubio in third place now in the Quinnipiac poll in Iowa at 13%. He was at 5% in September last month. Following Rubio in the most recent survey was Ted Cruz at 10%, Rand Paul at 6%, Carly Fiorina and Jeb Bush at 5%, and all the rest are under 3%. The strong showing from Ben Carson, who's gotten accolades for his debate performance and campaigns. What is it that Carson is talking about predominantly lately? During the period of this survey, can you tell me off the top of your head, what was it Carson was talking about? Not a wild guess. I mean, he was talking about the dangers of Islam. He was talking about the dangers of immigration and Sharia. This is taken during the period of time where Ben Carson said he doesn't think that a Muslim who believes in Sharia law and therefore the Constitution is subordinated should be elected president. That's when the media was having a cow. That's when all the political professionals, that's the end of his campaign. You just can't talk about it. You can't talk about minorities that way. You just can't do it. And he doubled down on it like Trump has doubled down on his things. And now in Iowa, he's at 28%. Here's how the Politico writes about it, in fact. The strong showing from Ben Carson, who has gotten accolades for his debate performance and campaign style, despite tossing out some inflammatory comments about Muslims and mass shootings, comes in part from his support from women who back Carson by 33%. Trump's percentage of women in this poll is 13%. So Carson is 8 points ahead of Trump overall, 20 points ahead of Trump in women. And you notice here that the Politico claims this support for Carson comes despite the things that he's been in the news for, which is how they constantly report on Republicans. Yeah, look, it's amazing. He's going great guns despite what he said about Muslims and Sharia and Constitution and so forth. A candidate who shares their values is most important to 28% of caucus goers. 23% think being honest and trustworthy is the key. Carson doesn't have to worry about which quality is more important because 84% of those polled said that he shares their values and 89% felt he was honest and trustworthy. So the two most important reasons a caucus goer would vote for a person in the Hawkeye caucus, Ben Carson scores 84 and 89 So you'd have to assume that in Iowa, they like what Carson has been saying about Muslims vis-a-vis being elected and subordinating the Constitution to Sharia law and guns. Donald Trump now says he would be open to closing U.S. mosques to fight ISIS. Anyway, I got to take a break here, folks. That could steer us into this. I really want to get into something today about this daily soap opera in Washington and how really it is a script that is written and how we only see 10% of what makes the news each day. And it relates to the presidential campaign and the Rubio, or the Paul Ryan Speaker of the House story as well. That and your phone calls are coming up, so hang in there. Be right back. Fireworks as the morning session of the Benghazi hearings just ended. Everybody was expecting a yawner. Everybody was expecting it to be typically Washington bipartisan yawner, polite and this and that. And fireworks erupted when Trey Gowdy began quoting emails written by Sidney Blumenthal, who is one of the most partisan communists in all of Washington and has been for I don't know how long. One of Hillary's closest confidants and advisors for as long as she's had confidence. She was by his side all during the Clinton administration. So Gowdy starts asking Hillary about Sid's emails. White House would not let her hire him. Clinton Foundation did. See, he's accessing American intelligence for her and briefing her on it, supposedly sending her cables. Gowdy read an email from Blumenthal asking Hillary to help him with a business deal he had in Libya, clearly outside the realm of her gig as Secretary of State. Well, anyway, it was so damaging. Apparently, my interpretation of this, for once, was right. It was a grand slam. It was exactly as I saw it, so much so that Adam Schiff and Elijah Cummings have now demanded that Gowdy release the full transcript of Blumenthal's testimony in a prior hearing that was behind closed doors and all of his emails. Now, I'm being told I didn't see any of this, so this is being passed on to me. The only thing I can, until I'm able to get into this, the only thing I can figure out why is that maybe they think Gowdy is not being honest or fully forthcoming about the content, maybe taking Blumenthal out of context or whatever. And Gowdy refused the request to make available all the transcripts involving anything Sidney Blumenthal has said. He said, well, the closed-door hearings, we haven't made the transcripts of anybody else available, and I'm not going to now. And apparently the lid blew after that. So the point is, and allow me some breathing room on this until I'm able, just getting all this on the fly while it's actually happening, while also hosting the program and keeping you glued to your radio. So certainly you're doing a damn fine job of it. I hope so. I hope this is pretty accurate. Cummings is now explaining himself to Dana Bash. This obviously was damaging, is what this all means. It obviously means that Gowdy put a dent in this image of Hillary that she put forth today as loving and caring and compassionate and disappointed and feeling so bad for the families. He did. You should have seen. She did a personality 180 change like you haven't seen. You want to call it bipolar? I mean, we saw it. It's like somebody took her off the meds. And it had an immediate, I don't know, Congressman, I don't know. I guess. I don't know. You work for Media Matters? Silence, silence, silence. Well, who did he have these consultancy deals with? I don't know. There were many entities. Could one of them have been your husband? I guess, yes, yes. So Blumenthal was being employed by your foundation. Yes, I guess, yes, I suppose. I don't know, Congressman. So clearly, points were scored here. They think some damage has been done. And they obviously think that Blumenthal has been taken out of context by Gowdy. I don't know why else they would want the full. I think the full transcript of Blumenthal can do nothing but hurt her. It probably is just for show. I think a lot of what Cummings and these guys are doing is probably to distract now because the blows were serious. I think that's what this. I'll bet you at the end of the day, that's what all this is really just for show. Because Gowdy did not ask Hillary about anything but what Blumenthal said in these emails. His testimony was not referenced. She wasn't asked about his testimony, only the emails that she and he were sending back and forth. So I think what Cummings was doing was standard Democrat distraction, obfuscation, and confusion 101. He was trying to distract Gowdy. He was trying to make what Gowdy was doing look ineffective and irrelevant. But there's nothing in Blumenthal's testimony that would explain away what Blumenthal said in his emails. That's why they better be careful for what they wish for here, because the exposure of everything Blumenthal was doing with Hillary cannot be helpful to her. Just can't. Half my brain tied behind my back just to make it fair. Rush Limbaugh here on the cutting edge with play-by-play of the important things happening in our nation's capital and throughout our country, often as they happen. Man, I'm so jealous of you people. You get to listen to this program. I never get to listen to it. I mean, in the past, and after it's over, you get to listen to this program as it happens. You are so lucky. So fortunate. Here's John in Dayton, Ohio. John, I'm glad you waited. It's great to have you on the program, sir. Hello.
Thank you, Rush. It's a real honor. I want to talk about something other than the circus in Washington for just a moment and address Paul Ryan's opposition to the Jefferson Rule.
I hate to tell you that's a circus too, and but go ahead.
Okay. And I know the media, the mainstream media, and Fox basically wants to talk about how great he is because he wants to be at home with his family and spend more family time. And I could do a sidebar on that from what you mentioned earlier. But my main reason for the call is that his opposition to the Jefferson Rule basically allows him as Speaker to impose unity on a disordered and divided House. The only people that are causing disorder or dividing the House in the eyes of the establishment are the people that are newly elected in the Tea Party base and the GOP base that put these guys in office to do a job that the establishment is not doing. So by eliminating the Jefferson Rule, it's kind of like a stopgap safety measure on behalf of Ryan in the event that a movement candidate like Trump or Cruz be elected to the presidency, that they'll have their man sitting behind him whenever he addresses Congress.
Wait now, run that last by me again. If Trump or Cruz is elected, who will have their man sitting behind him?
Every time the President of the United States speaks to Congress,
right?
The Vice President,
I know it'd be Ryan, but who do you mean when you say when the President speaks, they will have their man? That's Ryan sitting behind him. Who is they? Trump or Cruz?
The establishment.
The establishment, right. Opposing Trump and Cruz, right?
Correct.
Okay. You're on to something. I just wanted to clarify. I wanted to make sure. Sometimes people start using personal pronouns and they mean other people or what it sounds like. I just wanted to make sure.
I'm sorry.
No, you're right. Your instincts on this are right on the money. And I want to, folks, this whole Ryan thing hasn't made any sense to me from the first moment I heard about it. Look at this. I'll only do it if you guarantee me unanimous support. I will only do it if you remove the provision that you could recall me. I will only do it if I don't have to travel on weekends. One thing I've learned, Washington is a script. Things do not happen spontaneously. We are made to think they are. That's what the news is every day. But the news, as properly characterized by my friend Andy McCarthy, is actually a daily soap opera, and there's a script. All soap operas are scripted. The news every day is often used to camouflage what is really going on. Now, this is it's still forming in my mind, and I probably ought not start divulging this. It may just end up confusing you, because I haven't nailed it all down. But I've got my instincts, and then I've come across some things that I think are confirming my instincts. And then I'm having to assume some things beyond that. And it's always dangerous when you start assuming. But let me just run some of this by you. I think there was a seminal event in the House of Representatives that happened in 2012 that blew up a lot of plans. And that was Eric Cantor losing. That shocked everybody, as you recall. Cantor was a member of the Republican leadership, and Cantor was moving the donor class agenda. Cantor losing was a huge blow to the leadership's ties to the donor class. And as you and I well know, the donor class runs the Republican Party today, not the voters. Money is important both to get you elected. It's really important after you leave office, when you can have the skids greased for a high-paying job, either a lobbyist or a consultant to a corporation or whatever. But money, I mean, everybody wants more. I don't care how much you have. And the lure of more money is seductive. It just is. And it's always been a factor in politics, and it's always been a major factor. It's just now taken on a dimension that I think has always been there, but it's surfaced now. This cronyism, call it corporate cronyism, socialist cronyism, capital cronyism, whatever, it's visible now. They're not even trying to hide it. It's always existed, but it's worse now than ever because Obama's he's selling. He's selling support for his radical agenda to corporations who would otherwise be destroyed by the agenda if they didn't give him money and buy insurance against it, such as the hospital, such as the insurance business. Clinton also did this with all those coffees and selling the Lincoln bedroom. Cronyism, it's been around a long time. It's just now that we see it. We see, for example, major corporations supporting an increase in the minimum wage. Can we talk about Walmart for a second? This is not on point here, but it's something my brain synapses just fired on, and it makes the point. Walmart, out of the blue and shocking everybody, supported a Democrat call for raising the minimum wage. They were under pressure from unions to do so. And at the time, I remember pointing out to you, this is a classic example of the kind of cronyism that's taking place now. Walmart, theoretically, has the money to absorb an arbitrary increase in the minimum wage, but their competitors may not. So by associating with the regime, Walmart is able to win business competitions with, say, Costco or others without really having to beat them in the market. You sidle up to government, you get favorable treatment here or there. You agree because you agree with Obama the minimum wage. You're buying protection against something other thing. The other companies can't afford it and don't. and therefore it's more attractive to work at Walmart and so forth and so on. This is, in other words, doing deals with the government alleviates the need to be smarter and better in the market. Same deal goes for agreeing with Obamacare. If you've got the money as a corporation to do whatever Obama wants, fine, but your competitors can't. That's how you beat them. Now Walmart. I had the story in the stack here for 2 or 3 days. Now Walmart's stock price is flat. Their earnings are down. They're blaming the minimum wage increase. Honest to God, they are. They're blaming, and they're right, by the way. I mean, economically, they're right. But they weren't forced into it. I don't believe. Regardless, they're now complaining that their stock price and their earnings, whatever is flat, is because of the minimum wage. And, of course, here come big laborers. Oh, why do you lie? You can't lie about that. You got so much. You're kidding me, Walmart. You've got more money than God's got. You're telling me that raising a $5 increase in the minimum wage is hurting them. They're not going to let that stand. In Seattle, though, look at all the restaurants that have closed because of mandatory minimum wage increase. And now in New York City, you've got no tipping permitted. Prices are automatically going up. Restaurants are deciding to eliminate tipping. But anyway, back to this situation here with Eric Cantor. I really believe Cantor being defeated caused drastic action to be necessary. The donor class, if you doubt this, have you paid attention to where Eric Cantor is spending his post-election time? He spends it out in the Hamptons. He's a consultant now for some moneyed institutions or financial institutions. Anyway, Paul Ryan is the new Cantor, in my theory, in terms of moving the donor agenda. And what made me suspicious of this is, again, throw out the Jefferson rule and demand unanimous support. These are the kind of things that you demand when you don't really want the job and you hold all the cards. Now, you would not think that the Freedom Caucus, the conservatives in the House, the Tea Party caucus, whatever you want to call it, no way would they go along with this. No way under the sun would they go along with this. But looks like enough of them will. Now, Ryan said he needs 80% support from the Freedom Caucus, and if he doesn't get that, then he's not going to do this. And right now he doesn't have 80%. He might have 70, but he doesn't have 80. He got a majority. He's got a clear majority of them, but he doesn't have the 80% he said was necessary to equal unanimity. Well, we'll see if that actually makes him not want the gig or not seek it. What are you shaking your head? Yeah, he's already said he'd take the 70. I think that all of this, here's my point. I think that all of this was already arranged and agreed to before you and I heard a word of it. And when you and I first heard a word of it, it was presented as, this just happened. It's happening spontaneously. All of a sudden, they wanted Ryan. These are Ryan's demands. My point is, all of this happened last week, 2 weeks ago, whenever. Long before this list of demands was ever made public. There has been a plan to make Paul Ryan the Speaker of the House. And it's not spontaneous, and it isn't an accident or just the coming together of various unseen forces. Anyway, I got to take a break. I'm not through with this. I've got a little bit more, but now the ground gets a little shakier because what's next is still not sure of it. But I'll share it with you anyway. Sit tight. We'll be back in a moment. Welcome back. Happy to have you. Rush Limbaugh. Emitting vocal vibrations, coast to coast. Rhetoric and resonance. So Paul Ryan first said he needed 80% of the Freedom Caucus to take the gig, and they had a broom the provision that would allow them to recall the speaker. Those two things, and he's in. And no traveling and working on weekends. Freedom Caucus said, we don't have 80%, we get 70%. He said, I'll take it. And now Ryan's spokesman has also said that he would give up the demand about doing away with the power to vacate the speakership. Well, now, see, neither of these two were ever going to happen, folks. There was never going to be an agreement to vacate the rule that allows a speaker to be recalled. That was never going to happen. But you're sitting out there thinking, wow, they might get rid of it. They want Ryan really bad. It was never going to happen. Now, Ryan looks compromising. What it means, he really wants the gig. He'll take the 70% of the Freedom Caucus and he'll agree with doing away with the idea they're going to suspend the power to vacate the speakership. That means he really wants it. Well, it may not. His spokesman tweeted things that makes it look like he will give up that demand. He may not have officially said so, but anybody who thinks that was actually going to survive, this is how we get. I don't want to say played, folks, but I'm telling you, the script is written off-site, backstage. We don't see that. We see everybody playing their part, including the Freedom Caucus members. I think a lot of you would be shocked to learn why Freedom Caucus members really didn't like Boehner. It had nothing to do with ideas. It had to do with Boehner and the way he was running the place. Chairmanships, punishments, this kind of thing. They wanted him out of there for those reasons, not because he wasn't implementing conservative agenda. You'd be probably surprised. Here's the bottom line. Donor class wants what they want, and none of what's happened so far, including Trump and Carson, has them slowed down a bit. It hasn't deterred them or their desires. So the ultimate scenario is... Well, by the way, did you see Bill Kristol today? Bill Kristol said he's going to vote third party if Trump is the nominee. I thought Trump had to take a no third party pledge. I thought Trump had to sign one of those no third party. Bill Kristol's out there saying if Trump actually is going to be, he doesn't think Trump's going to win, by the way. And neither do these guys. I'm telling you, the House leadership thinks it's going to be Jeb or Rubio. The dream, Jeb or Rubio in the White House. Ryan, Speaker of the House. First 12 months of the Rubio or Jeb administration, first 12 to 18 months, the donor class agenda is implemented, including amnesty and whatever else they want. That is the objective here. That's what I think all this adds up to. Just guessing. So check the email. What happens if Hillary wins in your wild guess there, Rush? Oh, that's easy. If Hillary wins, the Republicans say, see, we have got to support comprehensive immigration reform or we're never going to win the White House. The donor class wants what the donor class is paying for. Don't forget it. Hi, folks, and welcome back. It's just a great thrill. It's an honor to be here with you each and every day behind the golden EIB microphone. Have an opportunity to talk about all this stuff, tell you what I think about it, get your thoughts on it, and hopefully, in some small way, help move things in the right direction. 800-282-2882 if you want to be on the program. And the email address, lrushmo@eibnet.com. Okay, I've got the Trey Gowdy sound bites from 1 hour ago, where the breakdown occurred with him and Elijah Cummings, where Mrs. Clinton was finally brought off this attitude she adopted at the beginning of the hearings. Nice, compassionate, just wants to be cooperative and helpful. And we saw the Nurse Ratched surface. And there were a lot of occasions that happened. And Mrs. Clinton, when the members of Congress would stack her emails on the desk in front of them, you could see her facial expression just change overnight. But, folks, before I get back to that, I want to indulge you for just a moment, or ask for your indulgence. 5 days from now, the fourth book in the Time Travel Adventures with Exceptional American series hits the shelves. Rush Revere and the Star-Spangled Banner. How best to explain this? I've been doing this program, we're now into 28th year. And it's much different now than it was the first 5 years. The first 5 years, every week we were announcing brand new stations that had just agreed to take the show, and the growth pattern was skyrocketing. And things that hadn't happened before were starting to happen. Not only within the context of the show, but for me personally and professionally. It was the second real success track that I had been on. And it was filled with newness by the week. Wrote my first 2 books and a TV show, and things, it just kept growing. And at a certain point, this happens to everybody, it's not a complaint. What this is a description of a learning experience, and why these books are so important to me. In any endeavor that anybody does, if after you've done it for a while, and if you happen to be at the top while you're doing it, the entire reason changes, the motivation changes. You've heard the old phrase, it's much more fun getting there than it is being there. You know why that is? It's harder being there. Once you're there, everybody in the world's gunning for you, and there's only one way to go. Even if nobody's gunning for you, there's only one way to go. But when you're getting there, and it's all new, and it's all exciting, and you're doing things that you've never done before, and things are happening to you that have never happened to you before, it just breeds excitement and breeds a sense of achievement and accomplishment at various levels and stages. But what is the accomplishment in staying there? I'm not minimizing it, but everybody, no matter what they do, if they reach a pinnacle, as I have been fortunate enough to do, and for a long, long time, you have to find ways to keep it interesting. Now, for me, I'm lucky as I can be that I love this as much today as I have ever loved it. Maybe even more. But there are no longer things happening like in the first 5 to 6 years. They've happened, and we've maintained them. So everybody in their life, if you count for anything, you always want to achieve. You don't want to rest on laurels, and you don't want to rely on the past to sustain you for a while. You want to keep going. But I don't like doing television. I actively do not like doing television. I've done that anyway, so that's nothing to conquer there. And I wrote a couple of books. Okay, nothing to conquer there. Been there, done it. But I have not done what we've done with these children's books. And that my point in telling you why I'm excited about this is because these books are providing for me, and I owe my thanks to you all for this, these books and the success that we're having with them. But more importantly, the substance and the purpose of these books are serving to create in me the same feelings of achievement and excitement that I had when this program was just starting, was brand new. Nobody had ever heard anything like it. And people were glomming up. We had Dan's Bake Sale and, all of that stuff that was just as exciting as it could be. Well, the books are that for me now. It's something I hadn't done before. And it's not something I ever thought I would do, write books for children, 8 to 12, 8 to 10, 10, 13, the demographic. Not something I ever thought I would do. Didn't really know if I could do it. And I found out it's not something I could do alone. I've got a great team that helps me with these things, starting with my wife, Catherine, and we've just got a bunch of people that make sure everything we put in these books is as accurate and close to true as we can get for an age group that we're writing for. And they've just been phenomenally successful. And we're up to our fourth now. Rush Revere and the Star Spangled Banner. I wish you could see all the reaction, the response that we get from young children reading these books, sending us pictures of themselves reading the books, dressing up as Rush Revere, creating their own playtime parties as characters in the books. I can't tell you how heartwarming it is. I can't tell you how meaningful it is. People ask me, well, how do you stay so optimistic? I would have to try not to be, just based on the good fortune I've had here in my career, and now with the success of the Rush Revere books. But again, we don't rest on the laurels of those either. Every book is its own challenge. Every book is its own test. Every book we try to improve, of course, like everything we do, make it better than what we did before. It sustains the challenges, the obstacles to overcome, all equal achievement. And I don't care who you are and how long you've done something. You still need that. It's no fun saying, yeah, I've done that, I've did that. It's no fun having a track record. The fun is building on it all. The fun is achieving even more. And it's also the challenge. It keeps me young at heart, and it keeps my mind engaged, which I think is key to not getting sick in many ways. And so we're excited as we can be about this next book, and it's been in pre-order since September 27th, and it actually is going to hit the streets on sale in bookstores and be delivered to pre-orders next Tuesday pardon the sniffles, on October the 27th. So I just wanted to take some time to thank you all again for helping us make these books what they are, because they do work. They're so needed. The things that young people are taught about this country versus what actually happened in our history, it's just sad. It's sad how the foundation, the founding, the formation, the miracle that is the United States of America, how it's being portrayed in way too many schools and classrooms today as immoral and unjust. I have a friend. Have you seen his new Tom Hanks movie about the Cold War? Yeah, I've heard it's good, too. There's an actor in this movie named Mark Rylance, and apparently Mark Rylance is the unsung hero. I say, who is this guy? He's a great British stage actor. And if you want to see who he is, rent or watch an episode of Wolf Hall on PBS about the era of Henry VIII. He plays Henry VIII's aide-de-camp, close advisor. Anyway, a friend of mine went to see the movie with his young daughter, college-age daughter. Her reaction, wow, this was so pro-America. She thought there was something wrong with it, because it was so pro-America. It's about the Cold War. It's about spies. I haven't seen it, so I don't know the real premise, but it's other than what I've read. But see, that's the point. Here's a college-age woman who comes out of watching and she's bothered by the fact that it's so pro-America. What is wrong with being pro-America, particularly in a movie about the Cold War in which we defeated the communist Soviet Union? What's wrong with that? And yet, this is what so many young people have been taught, that America's guilty, that America is all of these isms, and that it's perpetrated all of these injustices. And I just can't stand by and let it happen without doing something about it. And young people who need to know it don't listen to this program. They're in school. 8 to 10-year-olds are not listening here. So the objective was how to reach them. And the idea for the books actually was born from Vince Flynn, the late and great Vince, who has his last book is out. Kyle Mills completed Vince Flynn's last book. I went up to Minneapolis a couple of weeks ago for a launch. It's on October 6th for a launch event, roundtable discussion. 48 years old. It was just Kit Carson, 40. It's just been a really sad year for great people passing away way too soon. So a lot of people have been involved in inspiring these books. But this deals with the Star Spangled Banner, but there's also a time travel back where the students in Rush Revere talk to James Madison, the father of the Constitution. And to write that for 8, 9, 10, 12-year-olds, it's a challenge. So I just wanted to mention it again. I haven't talked about the book in 2 or 3 weeks here because it's in pre-order, and you know that. And it's phenomenal. But I just wanted to remind you again. And basically, thank you again for providing the thrills, the excitement, the achievement. After 27-plus years of doing the radio show and everything itinerant to it here on the EIB network. So, yeah, Barnes & Noble, Amazon, Books A Million, and I think you can find it at iBooks if you're really, if you look hard, if you want to get it there. But, yeah, Mark Rylance Wolf Hall is just... He's one of the best-kept secrets in America in terms of actors, but everybody that's never heard of him and watches him, sees him star in something, is blown away. And apparently that's the case in this movie. What's the name of this movie? This, I think a mental block. It's a Spielberg movie about the Cold War. It stars Tom Hanks. No, I won't see it till it's released on DVD or streaming or whatever. I can't go to a theater. It's not closed captioned. That's it. Bridge of Spies. Exactly. To show you how things are changing, do you know that the city of New York honored Ethel Rosenberg last week? Ethel Rosenberg and Julius Rosenberg were convicted and executed as spies. The New York City Council gave Ethel Rosenberg a proclamation for some great achievements that she was one of the greatest traitors and enemies in this nation's history. This is how jaundiced the left has made so much of this nation's past and the way they're teaching it now to people. Okay, let me take a brief time out. We'll come back, and the fireworks, not so much, there's some fireworks at the end, but just you can hear Gowdy. Before I promise, I better read the transcripts of what I've got here. I think I've got it. I think this is, this is Gowdy going after Hillary on Sidney Blumenthal. So sit tight. We're coming right back. Don't go away. Yes, your phone calls are coming up. I really appreciate your patience and holding on out there. All right, here we go. This is Trey Gowdy and Adam Schiff, Democrat from California. This is during the Benghazi Select Committee hearing today with Hillary Clinton testifying.
There is no theory of the prosecution, Mr. Schiff, because there is no prosecution. There's a very big difference between a prosecution where you already have reached a conclusion and you're just trying to prove it to people. This is an investigation, which is why it's so sad that nowhere in that stack that you just put up there, where the emails of Secretary Clinton, the emails of the ambassador, 50,000 pages worth of documents, eyewitnesses. That's the real tragedy. To the family and the friends, when you're told that there have been 7 previous investigations in an ARB, you should immediately ask, why did you miss so many witnesses? Why did you miss so many documents? This is not a prosecution, Mr. Schiff.
Now, this was important and good because the Democrats are trying to slime Gowdy and mischaracterize what he's doing and discredit it. And he wasn't having it. He was being accused of already reaching a conclusion, trying to nail Mrs. Clinton. He said, no, we're still gathering evidence because previous efforts have fallen so short and you guys are not helping. We've got all these witnesses that haven't been called. We got all these documents that we haven't been shown. Here's the opening, to Mrs. Clinton about the Blumenthal relationship.
It is undisputed that a significant number of your emails were to or from a Sidney Blumenthal. Now, he did not work for the State Department. He didn't work for the U.S. government at all. He wanted to work for the State Department, but the White House said no to him. Do you recall who specifically at the White House rejected Sidney Blumenthal?
No, I do not.
After he was turned down for a job at the State Department by the White House, he went to work where?
I think he had a number of consulting contracts with different entities.
Well, if he had a number of them, do you recall any of them?
I know that he did some work for my husband.
Well, he worked for the Clinton Foundation.
That's correct.
Okay. He worked for Media Matters.
I'm sure he did.
He worked for Correct the Record.
I'm sure he did.
I'm sure he did. You should have seen her face. Her face was saying, I hope you like living. I hope you like walking, Gowdy. Nah, that's what her face looked like. We have time for that. We do. Here is Gowdy detailing the back and forth between Hillary and Blumenthal in the emails.
I want to start with your public comment that these emails were unsolicited. You wrote to him, another keeper, thanks and please keep them coming. Greetings from Kabul and thanks for keeping this stuff coming. Any other info about it? Question mark. What are you hearing now? Question mark. Got it. We'll follow up tomorrow. Anything else to convey? Question mark. Now, that one is interesting because that was the very email where Mr. Blumenthal was asking you to intervene on behalf of a business deal that he was pursuing in Libya. What did you mean by what are you hearing now?
I have no idea, Congressman.
What did you mean by? That would have been her answer to any. What did you mean by? I have no idea, Congress. I don't know. I have no idea. Now, we've got two more. Well, may as well. May not get them both in. This is Gowdy right before Elijah Cummings jumps in. This is near what I'm told are fireworks at the end of this.
It's relevant because our ambassador was asked to read and respond to Sidney Blumenthal's drivel. It was sent to him to read and react to. In some instances, on the very same day he was asking for security. So I think it is eminently fair to ask why Sidney Blumenthal had unfettered access to you, Madam Secretary, with whatever he wanted to talk about, and there's not a single solitary email to or from you, to or from Ambassador Stevens.
Okay, so now what we have next, I can't squeeze in before the next break. It's 2.5 minutes. It's the fireworks. It's when Elijah Cummings realizes he needs to create a sideshow to distract everybody. Because what Gowdy just did here, it's been a subject all morning. Why didn't you respond to his requests for more security, Ambassador Stevens? I didn't know. I don't do email. I didn't get them. I don't know. My staff. And yet here she is chatting 15 times a day with Sidney Blumenthal. And Gowdy said, what's the deal here? And that's when Cummings stepped in. I'll tell you, the way I see this, Trey Gowdy's continuing to destroy her here. During the break that just happened, it wouldn't have mattered if we'd have gypped it, you still wouldn't have heard it. So don't complain. He is really zeroing in on the fact that Chris Stevens could not reach her, but that anybody else could. Blumenthal could reach her. The Libyans, who were short of diesel fuel, who were short of milk, Libyan people who were in trouble, they were able to directly reach Mrs. Clinton. In some cases, she responded in as short a time as 4 minutes. Chris Stevens, security requests, increased security they held out on the ground, she claims she didn't get. Gowdy wants to know why he couldn't get to her. Hillary maintained that he never made security requests to her, that the requests were made instead to State Department security officials, and that she never got any requests for additional security from Ambassador Stevens. That those kinds of things are not raised with her. Gowdy said two different things, Mrs. Clinton. I'm sorry. The point is not what here and who there. The point is why some people can reach you and why others can't. And why can somebody who doesn't work for the State Department, who wants to insult administration officials and make silly political comments like Sidney Blumenthal, reach you anytime he wants when he's not even a government employee, and your own ambassador can't? Mr. Gowdy, as I've explained countless times to serious questions from other... You just don't understand what's going on, Mr. Gowdy. I don't think you'll ever understand how things work in the State Department. And he's not deterred by her attempts. Anyway, we'll have, I'm sure, that and whatever else happens today tomorrow. But here is the way the morning session ended. The fireworks between Gowdy and Cummings. This is Elijah Cummings of Maryland, who had to go in and try to distract everybody and create some noise because it was obvious that Gowdy was scoring.
These facts directly contradict the statements you made on national television this last Sunday.
No, sir. With all due respect, they do not. We just heard email after email after email about Libya and Benghazi that Sidney Blumenthal sent to the Secretary of State. I don't care if he sent it by Morse code, carrier pigeon, smoke signals. The fact that he happened to send it by email is irrelevant. What is relevant is that he was sending information to the Secretary of State. That is what's relevant. Now, with respect to the subpoena, if he'd bothered to answer the telephone calls of our committee, he wouldn't have needed a subpoena.
Would the gentleman yield?
I'll be happy to, but you need to make sure the entire record is correct, Mr. Cummings.
And that's exactly what I want to do.
Well, then go ahead.
I'm about to tell you. I move that we put into the record the entire transcript of Sidney Blumenthal. We're going to release the emails. Let's do the transcript. That way the world can see it.
Well, we didn't.
The motion has been seconded.
Well, we're not going to take that up at a hearing. We'll take that up in a business
I've consulted
meeting
with the parliamentarian, and they have informed us that we have a right to a recorded vote on that motion. We want, you ask for the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Well, that's what we want to have. Let the world see it.
Why is it that you only want Mr. Blumenthal's transcript released? Why don't you want the survivors?
All of them released.
The survivors, even their names?
Let me tell you something. No,
you want that released?
Let me tell you something. Right now,
the only one you've asked for is Sidney Blumenthal. That's the only one you've asked for. That and Miss Mills.
That's not true.
No, that's 2 out of 54. Now, if you want to ask for some fact witnesses,
we asked for a recorded vote on the Blumenthal. You said from the beginning we want the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Why don't we just put the entire transcript out there and let the world see it? What do you have to hide?
These are the only emails that you have released. And the fairness to Mr. Blumenthal and to the American people, in the interest of a complete record, if you're going to release his emails, release his transcript where he has a chance to give the context of those emails.
Well, you keep referring to Blumenthal emails. I would hasten to remind both of you, the only reason we have Blumenthal emails is because he emailed the Secretary of State. Those are her emails. That's why they were released. They're not Blumenthal's emails, and she wanted all of her emails released. She's been saying since March, I want the entire world to see my emails. Well, Sidney Blumenthal's emails are part of that.
As you can see here, it matters that our chairman is an actual prosecutor, which he is. Trey Gowdy is by profession from South Carolina. He's a prosecutor. And Elijah Cummings and Adam Schiff, do not shake him up. Do not faze him. They're trying to distract him. They're trying to get him off his point, and he's not having any of it, and he's just turning it right back on. These are not Blumenthal emails. These are Hillary emails. We only have them because she released them. We're not slamming Blumenthal here. Hillary is. But then he continued when they came back. I want to know why Blumenthal can get to her anytime, any day, and her own ambassador requesting help couldn't. And why nobody else can. When you look at what Blumenthal's, and she was forced to just admit that Blumenthal, this is big too, Blumenthal is not my advisor as Secretary of State. But he is. That's the whole point. She has him around as a release valve, a comfort valve. They are fellow ideological travelers. Hillary and Sidney Blumenthal are identical liberal extreme radicals from the 1960s. And they're no different than Obama, folks. They are. They're all the same, and they all have the same agenda. And Hillary is getting away here with this nice and reserved and compassionate and so forth. And what's happening here is that the pictures are not lying. When she gets irritated, her facial expression changes. She can't hide it. When she gets irritated, and the real Hillary Clinton's been on display here. Now, again, most of this is never going to see the light of day in the drive-by TV networks. Anyway, I really, folks on hold, people on the phones, I really appreciate your patience. But as I say, this is improv every day. We go where the news goes. We go where the stories are. We go back to the phones now. Bill in Fort Walton Beach, Florida, thank you again for holding on. I appreciate it.
Rush, do you think that Bernie Sanders is a for-real candidate, or do you think he's a fake candidate trying to make Hillary Clinton look like she's got competition?
No, I think he's a real. I think he's a real candidate.
Okay.
Excuse me. Now, wait. That's not to say that his existence does not permit Hillary to take advantage of making herself look like a moderate. Because remember, this country is not a nation of radical leftists. They are but 10-20% of the population. Honest to God, folks, it's no bigger than that. And their constituency groups are even smaller. LGBT, 1/10 of 1%. Gay population, 2 or 3%. Made to look like half the country. They're not.
Do you think his supporters would support Hillary Clinton if he, like he said, he's not going to be allowed to get the nomination? If his supporters believe that, do you think it's likely his supporters would throw their support behind Hillary Clinton?
I still think it's up for grabs. I think it depends on how he loses. If it appears that she is cheating to force him out, then I think his supporters are genuine. Remember, his supporters are a bunch of dupes. These are the true believers who think that Bernie Sanders is a real deal, is the only authentic. His supporters are the real McCoy. They are genuine far-left radical extremists, and they cover all demographics and all age groups. And
what about the Trump and Carson supporters? Do you think if they appear, the same thing, same question, do you think Trump and Carson supporters would get angry at the party and throw their support behind whoever the eventual candidate is if it wasn't
That's
one of those two, or do you think they would stay at home?
That's dicier because the Republican Party is telegraphing they're taking Trump out. The Republican Party is leaving it to no doubt that their objective is to destroy Trump. And if they succeed, I don't know. We already had 4 million Republican voters sit home in 2012. So past experience says if it happened once, it's going to happen again and again and again. So that's a dicier situation. Don't forget Jeb Bush and his original statement are close to one of the first things he said when he got official about running for president. That was the objective, was to win the nomination without the base. Don't forget that. How do you do that? You do that with the donors. You do that with the money and the RNC, and you welcome all of the conservative candidates you can, and you split their support and money. And even if you're sitting there at 5, 6, 7%, somebody else is at 15 or 20, eventually they're going to go away. And you are going to be seen as the only electable mainstream candidate rather than some radical right-winger. That's the theory. I don't know that. I think the establishment already looking at a substitute, and that would be Rubio. In case Jeb, I don't know, it's all speculation now. But the Carson and Trump voters, it's a dicier proposition than it is Bernie's voters being mad and not voting for Hillary. I mean, look at Hillary's voters ended up voting for Obama when it came down to it in 2008. So they have let's face it, they have a much better track record at coming together. Even if it's just for one day on an election, they have the ability to do that. We haven't shown that we do. Back to the phones we go. Rush Limbaugh, the EIB network. Here is Alan in Denville, New Jersey. Great to have you, sir. Hello.
Hi, Rush. Good afternoon. How you doing? Get to the question, which actually has been modified a little bit as I've been on hold and listening to the unfolding of Trey's Gowdy's questioning. Originally, I was going to put forth the question. I was really wondering if if the GOP leadership, congressional leadership, leaned on the committee to not go full bore on Hillary, to really, give her a little dings but not damage her too much in order to eviscerate her as a candidate, because I feel that we have Trump, and they're really concerned with Trump's candidacy, and I believe some of the GOP leadership would actually rather have Clinton than Trump be elected president. But now, and then I'll let you go after this. But now, after I started hearing Gowdy speaking, I'm starting to wonder if he's going to have a little bit of flack from those leadership, because if he was leaned on, however, when they actually got to the hearings, I'm wondering if his prosecutorial instinct kind of took over.
No, I don't think Gowdy was leaned on. Let me summarize the question. As I understand it, the establishment hates Trump so bad that they would prefer Hillary be elected instead of Trump. Therefore, the establishment told the committee members, don't go too hard on Hillary, because if Trump gets a nomination, we want her to win. I would not want to be in the Republican hierarchy if this is the kind of thought they are engendering in people. But they obviously are. Here's a reasonable guy from New Jersey wondering if the Republican, whoever it is, the Republican apparatus, dislikes Trump so much they would prefer Hillary. And so don't damage Hillary too much. Now, before I knew where you were going, I can envision a scenario where they would say, don't hit her too hard, but not for the reason you gave, but we don't want them calling us a sexist. Be very careful here because of the war on women. Don't hit the girl. Don't be unfair. We don't want the media saying you were mean and anti-woman. That would not have surprised me. Speaking of, by the way, Hillary winning, and I had to jam this in 12 seconds before break ended, but, my scenario about what's going on with Ryan and the speakership and how this is actually a script that's been written for many, many days here, long before we first hear about it. I mean, the dream is, from the establishment point of view, that a Jeb Bush or somebody else, if he is unable to pull it off, that he's elected president. You got Paul Ryan as the speaker, and in the first 12 to 18 months, the donor class agenda gets implemented, including amnesty. I do not doubt that is what they want out of winning the White House. But suppose they don't. Suppose Hillary wins. I got a new one. What happens in your vaunted theory if Hillary wins? That's even easier, folks. If Hillary Clinton is elected the next president, what do you think the RNC is going to do? Or maybe not RNC, the Washington Republican establishment. You know what they're going to do? First, they're going to blame conservatives for the loss as being too radical and whatever. And then they're going to say, see, now will you listen to us? We have got to be in favor of comprehensive immigration reform or we're never going to win the White House. They're going to blame conservatives and the lack of support for immigration as the reason Hillary won. So they've got their bases covered in that regard no matter what happens. The donor class wants what it wants. It's not rooted in ideas. And you're not going to talk them out of it. They're going to have to be defeated ongoing. Thursday night football, and I don't even know who's playing. And that would have never happened before. I haven't the slightest idea who's on Thursday night football tonight. It is Thursday, right? Oh, that's right. Seattle and the Foreigners. That's it. Okay, but see you tomorrow. Open line Friday.